Hello. For this reflection paper, I'm taking a much more relaxed approach this time, so please bear with me. Now, if you haven't watched Maggie McCann's video, I recommend watching it, or I'm going to spoil the end of her video in about 5 seconds. So, if you've watched her video, you know that my arm was a little owie by the end of it. Right. Now, what do we do when things are owie? We take medication. And that's a really great segue into what I want to talk about, medical waste. Now, I'm going to give a lot of facts, but prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, US hospitals produced 29 pounds of waste per bed per day, which led to over 14,000 tons of waste per day. Now, a resource called ProPublica found that hospitals routinely toss out brand new supplies and gently used equipment. And I had read somewhere that hospitals, they found that people that did surgeries, their list of things they needed, a lot of them weren't actually needed. And that they ended up just tossing them at the end because they had been in that surgery environment. But they would have saved money if they didn't buy them in the first place. And that might be a safety precaution, oh, we might need this. I don't exactly know. But to track totals, which no one really does, one charity in Maine found that about $20 million worth of discarded goods in their warehouses. And the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center, they studied how much it wasted during neurosurgical operations in 1 year. And this discarded supplies were worth $2.9 million. Now, this same place, ProPublica, they looked at nursing homes. And nursing home patients typically have their drugs dispensed once a month. But when a patient in a nursing home either left the nursing home, they passed away, or they stopped using their medication for reaction reasons, for not needing it anymore, those kind of things, they had that leftover medication. So a lot of times what they did was they would flush them down toilets, put them in the trash, and sometimes they would pay to have them incinerated, all of which are not good. Putting them in the trash or flushing them in the toilet can infect water supplies. In fact, trace levels of pharmaceuticals have been detected in water throughout the country. And having them incinerate releases bad toxins into the air. And I'll talk more about what they could be in a second. But for losses, it's estimated that hundreds of millions of dollars a year are wasted by throwing out nursing home medications. In fact, in Florida, the CEO of a long-term care pharmacy said his pharmacy incinerated about $2.5 million in valuable medication every year. And he estimated that the total loss was $50 million statewide. So what can be done about this? Well, there's this process that's relatively new in the medical industry called thermal plasma treatment. And I will put it up on the screen. It basically helps the environment by putting things at a high temperature at a high density, and then it has lower emission rates, and it's a smaller machine, so it takes up less space. But there's downsides to this, obviously. It's a higher cost, higher energy consumption, and the plasma has to be replaced as a limited lifespan, and the refractory material may be needed due to high temperature. But even with its disadvantages, comparing this to traditional thermal technology for processing medical waste, where it would cause indispensable secondary pollution such as dioxin, furan, and other heavy metals and infectious materials that may remain in the solid residue, looking at that makes thermal plasma treatment seem like the obvious choice to use, especially when the medical industry makes over 25,000 2,500 billion in revenue every year in the US. So where does it fall in the sustainability sweet spot? And I guess that's my question. I don't know. You would think that, and I'm thinking just US, sustainability is like the public, that's like my question is, and that's, I would love to research this more. And like my theory right now is that if we look at the side of profitability and social impact, so profitability, obviously they're making so much money, and social impact is pretty high. They're obviously helping people because it's a medical industry, but you also have people who aren't receiving these medications, who are being affected by these landfills that are burning these medications. You have all this stuff that's factoring in. So I think their impact on society is not as good as we think it is. And I think their profit's really high. Now, I wonder if using more sustainable techniques will bring down their profits. Well, obviously it will, it's more expensive. And like, my thought is that these bigger companies should have no problem doing this. And like I had talked about earlier, the idea of like surgeons and stuff like that having materials they don't actually need. They would save money if they didn't buy them. So I don't get why they're paying and wasting all this money. And I can understand from a smaller business standpoint, if you're a small pharmaceutical company or something like that, these things may go unnoticed to you. Or they may be very noticed and you just don't have the funding to do better. But for these big companies, I just don't get it. And that's kind of all I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to reflect on how I think the medical industry is not being as sustainable as it could be. I think it's wasting a lot of things when it shouldn't be. So, I mean, what is its social impact on the world, environmental impact, and what should it be doing? And that's all. Thank you.